These two super sporty KTM Tourers are currently available at a lower price than ever before. 11,990 euros in Austria for the SMT and 18,990 for the 1290 Super Duke GT. Today, we are going for a fun ride.
And just like so many tours, we are also starting now at the gas station. Then we will ride 270 kilometers on a beautiful, curvy, relaxed loop to see whether the 7,000 euro price difference is justified and if it is worth getting one of the KTM Tourers right now. Well, we have not been on the road for long, but anyone from Eastern Austria knows that a mandatory stop is the Kalte Kuchel biker meeting point, and we thought we would use the opportunity to briefly point out the biggest technical differences for those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of riding these two machines, because they both fall into the similar segment of sport tourer / crossover. But just as these two vague terms differ, so do the bikes. Crossovers are more like tall road tourers, while true sport tourers usually come from the super sport or naked bike corner. And that is exactly the case with these two machines. The 890 SMT, for example, has its origin and base in the 890 Adventure. You can see that right away it is a bit taller with 180 millimeters of suspension travel in the front and the rear. The seat height of 860 is also higher than on the Super Duke GT. And this very distinctive low-hanging fuel tank, which you normally only find on the Adventure models, makes that fact quite obvious as well. The engine is of course the same, an 889 cubic centimeter parallel twin with 105 horsepower and 100 Newton meters of torque. I think that is the most important thing to know about the 890 SMT, maybe also the weight. Fully fueled, we measured it on our 1000 PS scale at 205 kilograms. And since I have not yet mentioned the fuel tank, on the SMT it holds just under 16 liters. So Poky, how does the Super Duke GT look in comparison?
You already mentioned it, the Super Duke GT, it even carries the name. It was developed from the Super Duke, but clearly in the direction of touring. The most striking difference is probably the suspension travel at the rear. Here we have 156 millimeters with a semi-active suspension system installed. At the front it is 125 millimeters. Taken from the Super Duke but not identical is the rear tire, because here we only have a 190 instead of a 200. Apart from that, the jeans are clearly Super Duke. What I really like is the fuel tank capacity of 23 liters. That gives you a very long range. And the seat height of 835 is also well suited for tall riders like me, but it is still manageable for shorter riders. Of course, the most important part is the engine. In this case, it delivers 175 horsepower from the V-twin. It is a 1,301 cubic centimeter engine, still the 1290 Super Duke, and not the 1390 Super Duke GT, which we do not even know will ever come. So, we will just have to wait and see. Other than that, you get a maximum torque of 141 Newton meters. That means even a very gentle twist of the throttle is enough to catapult you forward. Maybe one more difference compared to the SMT, we have an adjustable windscreen at the front, which can easily be adjusted with one hand, even on the highway. And then, the passenger seat is a bit raised here, while the SMT comes with a continuous seat bench. On top of that, you get a single-sided swing arm and a sharper braking system. Brembo Stalama calipers on 330mm discs on the Super Duke GT. You really cannot get much sportier than that. Speaking of wheels, both bikes are fitted with the T33 tires, because we thought, well, touring in mid-September can mean cooler mornings and some damp roads, but we will discuss this touring tire in more detail elsewhere.
Greetings from our lunch stop at the beautiful Treffling-Fallhütte near Buchenstuben. Buchenstuben, if you are in Austria, is an extremely awesome motorcycle road. That was really a lot of fun.
We navigated with Kalimoto, so we can drop the link below for you. Everyone knows Ochsattel, everyone knows Kalte Kutschel, but for me this is actually the even cooler road in the eastern Austrian area.
So, one highlight after another. And if you just take a turn right next to it, you come here to Salzbichel. No, sorry, it's called Sulzbichel, to the Treffling-Fallhütte. But what we wanted to talk about since we started discussing it is that both engines are pretty awesome units. We agree on that. And since we have already had pretty much everything on our ride today, purely subjectively, can you say which engine you personally prefer?
Yes, I can actually say that quite easily. It is the parallel twin in the 890 SMT.
Really?
Yes, indeed, no question. The V-twin in the Super Duke GT is insane and pushes so incredibly hard. But for me, this 890 engine in the SMT is simply what is ideal on country roads. I can rev it, it has torque at the bottom, it pushes out with 100 Newton meters, it has enough at the top, and on paper there are 70 horsepower between them. But in practice, no matter who was sitting on which bike, neither of us really noticed that difference, right?
Yes, on a mostly twisty route like the one we were riding, that really is the territory, I would say, of the SMT engine, because it pulls so hard. I also find it impressive that it seems to have absolutely no power gap at all.
It delivers at the bottom, it delivers in the middle, it delivers at the top.
It always pushes, and it pushes really brutally. I believe there are about 50 Newton meters or 40 Newton meters of difference between the Super Duke and this one, but you simply do not feel it. Only when you really have space, of course. And I have to say, I find the Super Duke, or more precisely, at the big KTM V-twin, extremely awesome, because if you think about it, there is no other large and high-performance two-cylinder engine that delivers so much emotion while at the same time offering such a high level of refinement, because the only one that comes to mind is the BMW Boxer, obviously. It has nearly the same displacement and is also a two-cylinder, but in the 1300 GS it feels significantly more digital and tame to me. It simply does not match the character of this KTM V-twin. And going in the other direction, if I think about the Ducati Super Quattro V-twin, which was still available until recently, that one also had around 150 horsepower, just a bit above that. That engine had endless character, but riding it at low speeds and down was pure torture. And I think the KTM engine perfectly balances those two extremes.
It is a great V-twin. Still, what it cannot shake off, and this is somehow inherent in big V-twins, are the vibrations. Below 3,500 revolutions per minute, the engine does not feel comfortable. It is fine if you keep the throttle steady, but as soon as you roll on the throttle and want to accelerate, the whole windscreen and the fairing start rattling in the front. Only once you get past the 4,000 RPM mark, I would say, does it start to pull brutally and really strongly. And at higher revs, that rattling completely disappears. Speaking of rattling, the topic of sound is not really a highlight for me on either bike. The parallel twin produces somewhat clinical noises. The V-twin does sound awesome at high revs, but of course with an aftermarket exhaust, you could probably improve it even further.
I did not find that so critical, but maybe that is because I have been riding a lot of Euro 5 Plus models recently, and they all sound pretty restrained. Personally, I think the V-twin rumbles nicely, while the KTM parallel twin, the 890, sounds a little too cheeky to me, but that is subjective. One more thing I wanted to say about the vibrations. Yes, it shakes you, but when I think back to the Ducati V-twin, for me that was really unrefined. The KTM engine is great. Even in town, riding in 4th or 5th gear works fine, but when you want to accelerate, you do have to downshift. Still, considering how much performance you get out of it, I think that is totally fine. We often say it with these kinds of engines, and owners of such bikes have probably heard it many times, but yes, it is a bit exaggerated.
As we already said, the fun begins where the speed limit ends on the Super Duke GT. And that is also why I think the SMT with the 890 engine inside is simply the better machine on country roads. As I mentioned, it can do everything, and it can also handle being in a higher gear without any issue. So it really does not matter. Whereas with the Super Duke, it has to fit perfectly. It is a subjective feeling, but because so much more power comes afterward, you end up going even faster. You should not always be riding too fast. And that is, I think, exactly where the Super Duke has a bit of a problem. And yes, I think we have already talked a lot about the riding experience.
Yes, let us ride a little more, get another feel for it, and then we can move on to the other impressions.
Gregor, you are smiling. A few corners later, we are here at Wasel am Wald, and we thought this would be a worthy spot for this part of the presentation.
Yes, it really has a beautiful alpine flair, I must say, before we unfortunately have to head back home again.
Exactly. Speaking of heading home, that makes me wonder, on which one would you rather sit for a longer ride? How do the two compare ergonomically?
I have to say, in principle, I find both comfortable. Of course, I tend to be more of the lazy rider type, meaning adventure touring bikes, a pushing riding style, sitting upright. That is my home when it comes to motorcycling, and naturally the SMT fits that better. It has a really wide handlebar, completely upright seating. Even the foot pegs are more in the adventure direction. That means I immediately feel at home on it. But, and this is what I already mentioned earlier with the engine, I also find this in the rest of the Super Duke GT package. It is very approachable and very easy to handle for such a massive motorcycle, which it really is. First of all, I think there are sport tourers that are simply too cramped for me, where I start to get problems with my knee angle over longer rides. Especially, I am talking about the classic sport tourers that have their roots in the super sport and naked bike segments. That is not the case here. I find there's quite a lot of space for such a classic sport tourer. And for example, you do not have clip-on handlebars here, but instead a really nice wide naked bike handlebar.
Yes, and with a good bend towards the rider. And Marcel, our cameraman, by the way, thanks for the great footage. Please give him a thumbs up already and subscribe to the channel while you're at it. Marcel also had the feeling that the Super Duke GT kind of swallows you. It really embraces you, in the best sense of the word. You immediately feel at home on this motorcycle. He is about our size. I am 1m87 m, 1m85 m, and he is just under 1m90 m. So we are all relatively similar in height. And if we switch over to the SMT, it is different. On that bike, you sit nicely on top. In that sense, it absolutely deserves the SM, the supermoto part of its name. Of course, there is also the large tank in front, a tank hump that does not let you move too far forward. But the pushing riding style works beautifully. Even with my height of 1m87 m, the knee angle is totally relaxed. I think this crossover market is the best recommendation for tall riders. There is also the continuous rally seat that raises the seat height, I believe, by another 2 or 3 centimeters in the original KTM accessories. And then you probably get as relaxed a knee angle as on almost no other motorcycle. But I think ergonomically, we have now covered things pretty well.
Yes, and you already built the bridge to handling and cornering behavior. That is perfect, because here, pushing the bike into the corner really works. I think once, when I was in front of the camera, I even stuck my foot out because it felt so much like riding a supermoto. So I think the SM in the name is absolutely justified, and together with this lively engine, it makes for insane fun. And the foot pegs, even though they are placed quite low, taken over from the Adventure, which is good as you said, for tall riders, still give you a lot of lean angle clearance thanks to the long suspension travel. At the same time, the suspension is tuned quite sportily. I had an insane amount of fun in fast direction changes. At the same time, the Super Duke GT again stands in contrast to other classic sport tourers, which are often more like super sport motorcycles, where you have to steer into the corners more with your body. The Super Duke, in this respect, is also extremely approachable. I think I even deliberately pushed it into the corners sometimes. Yes, it takes more input than the SMT, but not excessively more. And even though it has about 30 kilograms, I think it is exactly 31 kilograms, still more weight, it still does not take excessive force to steer it through corners. Of course, if you prefer it, you have the shorter suspension travel, you feel more clearly what the front wheel's doing, connection to the road is greater here, and you can also ride it with a bit of hang-off and really let yourself lean into the corners. That works as well, but no matter how you ride it, the bike is very willing to lean, very easy to tip into lean angles. And what I especially like is how neutral it feels when steering into corners, perfectly harmonizing with the feedback from the front wheel. There is no sudden dropping into the curve. The SMT, on the other hand, is more agile, maybe even a bit twitchy, you could say. They both have the same tires, so on that level they are equal. But this motorcycle is incredibly harmonious, how it lets you increase lean angle degree by degree. I really like that.
Yes, as you already said. If you grab this bull by the horns, you can force it into a pushing riding style, but I still think that is not really its natural way, while the SMT wants and needs exactly that. And since you mentioned the suspension travel already, let us talk about suspension. I really have to say, especially when switching directly between the two, you immediately feel that this is simply one class higher. You really notice the semi-active suspension. The front wheel feedback is extremely good. Here, also due to the ergonomics, you get a slightly less relaxed feeling. With the longer suspension travel, you notice more dive when braking, something you do not get with the Super Duke GT. Depending on which of the three suspension settings you choose, I believe they are Comfort, Street, and Sport, you get a little more or less comfort. But still, it always provides very good feedback from the front wheel about what is happening underneath you.
I have to say, the biggest advantage I see, especially when you think about how an average rider would ride, is simply the range that the semi-active suspension allows. You can make it nice and soft at the push of a button. We rode over a bumpy track and it was completely painless, and then when you want to push it, you have a good asphalt surface, you want to feel every crack, you switch to Sport and it really comes alive. No conventional suspension can offer that range with such quick comfort and switching. But Marcel also mentioned it when we rode together for the tracking shots. The SMT is great because the suspension provides enough stability while still offering comfort, a very good balance, even when riding two up. So it is easily conceivable to put on panniers, maybe a passenger, and go on a tour. That works too. I think both suspensions in solo riding provide exactly what you want. Here you simply get comfort at the push of a button.
Exactly, and also the rear preload adjustment. With luggage and a passenger, it is done here at the push of a button and on the other bike with a hand wheel, which I also find a great and practical solution. And of course, the 180 millimeters of suspension travel, which on perfect asphalt, like the road we just rode, can be a disadvantage, are naturally an advantage on rough tracks or tighter roads. I glided over it, and the others suffered on the Super Duke GT, and Marcel was riding our long-term tester, the MT-07.
But it was fine.
Yes, everything has its pros and cons.
And now I think we come to the last point regarding riding impressions, where for the first time I can not only express satisfaction but also qualify it. The brakes. Considering how high-end the components are, the Brembo Stylema, which is already something special, feels almost a bit soft here and at the same time requires quite a lot of hand force on the front brake. It works, you can feel that it is a big brake, so there is enough stopping power. But especially in comparison to the, I find, excellent front brake on the SMT, which offers a really nice and crisp bite, does not require much lever travel to engage, and is still very easy to modulate. That is really a brake that comes very close to my ideal. The Super Duke GT, despite the higher price and the supposedly better components, does not quite match up.
True, I mean both bikes are 2024 models from KTM's press fleet. Each has already done over 3,000 kilometers, so you cannot guarantee that the brake pads are still at absolute top performance. On the other hand, I see that positively, because it is a realistic test. How do they perform after 3,000 kilometers? And here I agree with you. The SMT gets an absolute top rating, especially considering the price. And the Super Duke GT, yes, it has the better brake in terms of pure performance, but it also has to stop over 30 kilograms more weight. You can feel that. With a brake service, it would probably perform better again, but in a direct comparison of these two bikes, it perhaps falls a little short.
Very nice. And I think the last point we will briefly touch on is the electronics. But I really only have to say that KTM electronics, in terms of control cycles, are very, very advanced. The traction control manages everything, but you barely notice it. At the same time, the adjustability, the intuitiveness of the control concept, and the readability of the large TFT screens, that is exactly how I wanted and expected on both bikes. Nothing more to add. And the quick shifter, also excellent.
Yes, the quick shifter is great on both. For me, the parallel twin still has a slight edge. It also has an easier job compared to controlling the V-twin. Perhaps something interesting for touring riders, both displays have a USB port on the side, each with a USB-C connector, absolutely modern. And as you said, the control cycles are really top-notch. The small SMT does not need to hide from the bigger bike here. The only extra feature it has is launch control, which we were both a bit intimidated by.
No, that is too much for me. And hill start control, as BMW calls it, it has that as well, so starting uphill is supported.
And then the larger display, which can show turn-by-turn navigation, offers advantages. But again, the SMT does not need to hide here either, although some features are naturally restricted, like the quick shifter. Yes, Gregor, and before we continue on the road, we should briefly talk about the tires. We already mentioned them earlier. It is the Bridgestone T33, the sporty touring tire from Bridgestone, which came out this year. tire. We wanted to create identical conditions, so we fitted it on both bikes, and in my view, it suits both excellently. Of course, the Super Duke GT is definitely pushing this tire to the maximum. 141 Newton meters can pull on the rear tire under certain circumstances, and in this dimension, 190, that is the largest available. There is no bigger size. We will link the dimensions for you below. Gregor, was it overwhelmed with the Super Duke? Today we had 26 degrees, nice weather.
So I think if you want, you could overwhelm any tire with an engine like the KTM 1300 V-twin. If you just blindly roll it on at full throttle, it develops so much power, so much forward thrust that the tire simply cannot handle it. But that is not really the point or the goal, is it? Then of course the question is, what do you actually want from the tire? Of course you could fit a Hypersport tire, which would probably be able to put that power on the road a bit better in that critical range, but at the same time it would not have the longevity of a touring tire. So depending on the asphalt and how aggressively you use the throttle, after 2000, 2500, 3000 kilometers, it would be done. And if you are carrying luggage or a passenger, putting even more load on the tire, it will continue to wear faster. And personally, I think even with a touring tire like the T33, which still has its sporty qualities, more is possible than I would dare, with respectful caution regarding traffic laws or what I would approve of. So what more do you want? And at the same time, if it rains, a Hypersport tire can become really tricky. Here, everything is fine, you can ride long distances and you have the higher mileage. So I still see a tire like this as very well placed, even on a sporty bike.
Yes, I can really only agree. On the SMT, it is similar, maybe even less of an issue because it does not put as much power on the rear wheel. I think on the racetrack, after 5 or 6 fast laps, you would probably overwhelm it and then it might start slipping. But for everything on the road, honestly, I do not see the point of a sports tire anymore. Touring tires operate at an incredible level, and as you said, wet conditions, which thankfully we did not have today, or the cold in the morning, the faster warm-up, the siliceous component, all of that helps make the bike safer and allows the tire to perform well within a temperature range that you normally have on a ride. It is simply better because it has a wider effective temperature window than a sport tire. So my choice is always the touring tire. I forgo the last 3% of performance that a sport tire might give. And therefore, the T33 gets my recommendation. I know the T32, the predecessor, very well. I rode it a lot. But here, with the new tire, no compromises at all. Allegedly, the wet performance has been improved, which we could not test today. But I think for both of us, it is a clear recommendation for the tire.
Absolutely, and with that, I think it is time to tackle the last kilometers. At the end of our tour, we will report back on all the practical qualities of these two motorcycles.
What do they consume?
For example, we will also talk about the price and give the final verdict, etc. See you in a moment.
You can see it in our squinting eyes. The sun is low. Our awesome riding day is coming to an end. We refilled both bikes. We rode 220 kilometers. Gregor, what did you use?
11.35 liters over the 220 kilometers. The speedometer says 5 liters per 100 kilometers, which is about right. So considering how we rode, definitely not a fuel-saving style. Absolutely okay. And we also have a comparison value. Marcel was on an MT-07 with YAMT and he used only slightly less. So you can say for a sporty, fun bike, a really good fuel consumption.
The 1290 did not drink quite that little. The speedometer showed 6.7 liters. In reality, over 210 kilometers, it was 15.5 liters. So that comes out to about 7.3 liters. But I have to say, the difference is roughly 2 liters. And I think you also have more performance under you here. Do you need it? No, usually you not. But is it awesome? Yes. So I would definitely refuel again. And in my view, it is perfectly acceptable for what it offers. Gregor, your verdict, how does it look?
Both are extreme fun machines. I think neither of them is too extreme or overly sporty. They both actually offer quite a lot of approachability and accessibility, as we often call it. If someone asked me which one to choose, I am not sure, given the price difference, how often that question really comes up. But purely from the overall concept, I would recommend the SMT to those who perhaps also ride the motorcycle in everyday life and therefore need and appreciate those pragmatic virtues a bit more. The steering lock is also much larger here, so all kinds of tight maneuvers and parking are easier on the SMT. The handlebar is also at a height that is better for weaving through traffic, especially in the city. With the Super Duke being so low, you are often at car mirror height with the handlebar, which makes it harder, so the SMT is simply a bit more approachable and easier in everyday situations. At the same time, the Super Duke GT has an absolute unique selling point, you have to say that. And especially with the uncertain future of the KTM group and the large KTM models, maybe this is the last chance to get your hands on such a unique machine.
Yes, KTM has confirmed that a 1390 adventure is coming. The 1390 Super Duke exists, but so far we have no confirmation that a 2026 1390 Super Duke GT will be released. I have ridden the prototype, but whether it stays that way and whether I'm the only one to do so, time will tell. What can be said already is, for the current price being asked for these two bikes, anyone even slightly interested should test ride them and then go for it. In my view, now is exactly the right time. The bike once cost over 26,000 euros in Austria, the other cost 16,500 euros in Austria when it came out. Those were already significant amounts. Now we are well below that. 19,000 here, 11,990 here, so there is no need to think twice. Definitely, if you are considering it, grab it. As for my choice, I am very much in love with the SMT. If KTM maybe brings a Husqvarna version with slightly more appealing looks, I think I would have to sign the purchase contract. This one is just so much fun to ride. It is amazing what a V-twin can trigger. It is even occasionally dangerous for the license because it just marches forward, but overall both are great touring machines. With a taller windscreen from the accessories, it is even more comfortable, though the stock setup is already very good. Both offer payloads well beyond 200 kilograms, so riding two up is no problem at all. Great motorcycles. For me, it would be the SMT, but I can understand anyone choosing either. So now is the time to act. I can only repeat myself. Gregor, do you have any wise closing words?
I think I have said everything. Which one would I lean towards? I think I would also go with the SMT simply because I ride almost exclusively on the road. But if I were someone whose main motorcycle, which it probably would be, also occasionally sees a track day, then the choice looks very different because we are missing a 1290 V-twin Super Sport from KTM, which this one comes closest to as it offers a little wind protection. I can imagine I would like to try it at one of our track days. And then with Hypersport tires on it, totally crazy, but who knows, maybe in the future.
That's it. For us today, the T33 was more than enough. It was really a great tire. I can only give it another recommendation here. Otherwise, your opinion is now required. Should you buy now? By the way, there is a 4-year warranty. We haven't mentioned that yet. 4 years if you buy now, so you can ride worry-free. What is your opinion? Buy now or forever stay away from KTM. A cool feature I just noticed, the valves, the angled valves. Very practical for adjusting tire pressure. Marcel showed it to us and he is right. Top notch on both bikes.
Well, everyone is heading home and I think that will be us now too.
Yeah, that's true. So your opinion below. Thumbs up for us, for KTM and for Marcel behind the camera. I'll say goodbye and say bye-bye. Take care.
See you. I'm going to have a sunburn on the right side if I don't get shade. By the way, one of the cameras is apparently still filming.
Oh, very cool. I think it had stopped, but apparently not.
Have fun in the editing room.